Frank Sutton wasn't just an actor. He was a symbol of strength, discipline, and humor. But behind the loud voice and tough face that millions of fans loved on TV, there was a man with struggles, secrets, and a heart that eventually gave out too soon. His life was full of highs and lows, and the real story behind his success and sudden death is one that still surprises many to this day. Born on October 23, 1923, in Clarksville, Tennessee, Frank Spencer Sutton came into the world during one of the hardest times in American history, the Great Depression. Growing up during that time wasn't easy. Money was tight, and families had to fight for every small bit of comfort. But even as a young boy, Frank had a fire in him that stood out. He was drawn to acting from a young age, finding happiness and purpose in school plays and local theater productions. While other kids played sports or worked to help their families, Frank was memorizing lines and performing on stage. That passion never faded. After finishing school at East Nashville High, he made a bold move. He enrolled at Columbia University in New York City and studied drama. It was a huge step, leaving behind a quiet southern town for the fast-paced world of New York. But Frank was serious about his dream. He worked hard and graduated with honors, already showing the determination and focus that would define his career. He wasn't just chasing fame, he wanted to be great at what he did. Just as his acting dreams were starting to take shape, the world changed. After the attack on Pearl Harbor, America entered World War II. Like many young men of his generation, Frank wanted to serve his country. He first tried to join the Marine Corps but was turned away because he was colorblind. That didn't stop him. He joined the U.S. Army instead and ended up serving in the Pacific, where he faced real danger head-on. He was part of 14 assault landings, including the deadly battles of Leyte and Luzon in the Philippines. These weren't movie scenes, they were brutal, real-life fights. Frank rose to the rank of sergeant, showing the same grit and discipline he would later bring to his roles on screen. After the war, he returned to civilian life with a new sense of purpose. The experiences he had in battle left a mark on him, shaping the man he would become. He went back to acting, but now with a deeper understanding of people and emotion. During the 1950s, he took whatever roles he could get, appearing on early television shows and working in theater. Slowly, his reputation grew. He wasn't a flashy actor, but people knew he could deliver. One of his first big breaks came in 1955, when he acted alongside Ernest Borgnine in the film Marty. The movie won several Academy Awards, and while Frank wasn't the lead, his performance didn't go unnoticed. Hollywood was starting to see what he could do. But his life changed completely in the 1960s. That's when he was cast as Sergeant Vince Carter in Gomer Pyle U.S.M.C., a spin-off from The Andy Griffith Show. It was the role that made him famous. As the grumpy and intense drill sergeant constantly trying to whip the cheerful and clueless Gomer Pyle into shape, Frank became a household name. The chemistry between him and Jim Nabors was lightning in a bottle. Their back-and-forth arguments, eye rolls, and hilarious misunderstandings gave the show its heart. Millions of Americans tuned in every week. They laughed, they repeated his catchphrases, and they fell in love with the tough guy who actually had a soft side. What made Frank's performance so special was that he wasn't just playing a character. He was pulling from his own military experience. That's why it felt real. He knew what it was like to lead, to follow orders, and to deal with pressure. He gave that role everything he had and it showed. The show ran from 1964 to 1969, becoming one of the most loved sitcoms of its time. Even during a period when America was deeply divided over the Vietnam War, people found comfort in the show's simple humor and strong characters. Frank's performance wasn't just funny, it was grounded, real, and relatable. He wasn't pretending to be tough. He was tough, and people respected that. After Gomer Pyle ended, Frank didn't stop working. He continued to appear in popular TV shows, proving that he wasn't a one-hit wonder. He took roles in The Twilight Zone, Gunsmoke, The Untouchables, and many more. He even joined Jim Nabors again on The Jim Nabors Hour, where he had the chance to show off a lighter, more comedic side in skits and musical segments. Audiences loved seeing him step out of the military uniform and try something different. Frank also began performing in live theater, especially dinner theater, which became hugely popular in the 1970s. These shows allowed him to interact with fans more directly, and reminded everyone that he was more than just a TV character. One of his most powerful stage performances was in a play called Norman, Is That You?, which touched on themes that were way ahead of their time. It was a comedy, but it had emotional weight, and Frank's performance showed his range in a way TV never really had. Away from the stage and the screen, Frank had a solid and loving home life. In 1946, he married Toby Igler, a bright and talented woman who became a successful television writer. The two of them were a team, supporting each other's careers and raising a family with shared values and deep love. They had 2 children, Joe and Amanda. Joe would grow up to be a playwright and professor, clearly influenced by the artistic and passionate environment his parents created. Frank often said that his proudest achievement wasn't his TV fame. It was being a husband and father. That tells you a lot about the kind of man he really was. But behind all the success, something was going wrong. Frank was pushing himself harder than ever. He was constantly traveling, performing, and putting on a strong face for his fans. What most people didn't know was that his health was starting to fall apart. He was a heavy smoker, didn't have the best diet, and rarely gave himself time to rest. Even after doctors warned him about heart problems, he kept going. Slowing down just wasn't in his nature. Then came the moment that no one saw coming. On June 28, 1974, while preparing to go on stage for a play in Shreveport, Louisiana, Frank Sutton collapsed in his dressing room. He was only 50 years old. A heart attack ended his life in an instant. Fans were shocked. The tough, loud sergeant they had watched for years was suddenly gone. It didn't make sense. He had always looked so strong, so full of life. But the truth was, he had been ignoring signs for years. Signs that his heart couldn't take the pressure anymore. His death raised a lot of questions. Why didn't he take his health more seriously? Why didn't anyone around him step in? Some blamed the non-stop work schedule. Others pointed to his fear of looking weak. Friends and family later said that Frank had been hiding his symptoms. He didn't want to scare anyone, and he definitely didn't want to risk losing work. That decision, sadly, cost him everything. His wife Toby was devastated. They had been married for nearly 30 years. She never remarried. She made it her mission to protect Frank's memory and make sure people remembered not just the actor, but the man. Their children, especially Joe, continued the family's creative legacy. Joe wrote powerful plays that tackled serious issues, always carrying a bit of his father's honesty and passion. Frank Sutton left behind more than just TV episodes. He left behind lessons about dedication, family, health, and the silent struggles people face even when everything looks perfect on the outside. His life wasn't perfect, but it was full of meaning. He gave the world laughter, strength, and unforgettable characters. And even now, decades after his death, fans still talk about him, still smile at his old performances, and still wonder what more he could have done if he had just slowed down. The mystery around his sudden death has now been solved. It wasn't caused by some hidden scandal or shocking secret. It was a mix of poor health choices, ignored warnings, and the pressure of always having to be strong. That truth is hard to hear, but it's also real, and it makes his story even more powerful. Frank Sutton's legacy lives on through his work, his family, and the millions of fans who still admire his talent. He was more than a character on a show. He was a real person with dreams, flaws, and a voice that made people stop and listen. And now that the full story is known, it becomes even clearer just how much he gave, and how much he sacrificed. If this story moved you or made you think, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more powerful life stories. And if you remember watching Frank Sutton on TV or learned something new about him today, let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear your thoughts and memories.